I don't know why, but every time I make one of these videos, I've either got a cold or I've just been through the most like horrendous traumatic thing. But yeah, this time it's a cold. It's like I say in all my videos, the difference between an ascending soul and a descending soul is that an ascending soul, in the face of challenging experiences, becomes more awakened, and typically traumatic experiences result in massive waves of expansion of consciousness and downloads from divinity. Almost like an exchange, like you have to suffer if you have to make a deal if you want to see more, if your eyes want to journey more as to the nature of reality and divinity. But you're going to have to pay something to get there. So yeah, it's usually a traumatic experience. And then you have the descending soul, which is when they undergo traumatic experiences, they become more disassociative. They become more unconscious of what's going on in their being. They become more fragmented within themselves. They develop more amnesia. They're just less aware of what's going on in the face of trauma. And of course, in my previous videos, I attributed that to differences in progressions of the soul, like being placed in the same lifetime. You have ascending souls and descending souls born into the same lifetime point in time, but they are at different stages in the transmigration of the soul, which is a separate progression than the progression of linear time. But anyways, in this video, I wanted to talk about a whole bunch of stuff, but I guess the central idea that would tie it all back together is polarity and alchemy in relation to emptiness and dissolution, which I'll get to in a moment. But the first thing I want to talk about, one of my observations I'd made recently, is how the ways that the scenes that we see in life can be modeled after the structure of divinity and the principles and forces that animate our existence. So, for example, in my last video, I talked about the mirror world, and essentially, I consider God, at least in the definition of Ibn Arabi's God, the non-dual God. It's many people's God, I suppose. The God in the Kabbalah, they call it the Ein Sof, and then Keter. But understanding God as the consciousness that makes up everything, I described this consciousness as also having a mirror quality. So in other words, mirrors can be a really good way of understanding how God functions in the world. So just as a recap, the Ibn Arabi's description of God from his Fusus al-Hikam, Ibn Arabi being a prolific and tremendously insightful mystic, Sufi mystic. I say, God is everything that exists, for he is the creator of all existence, but he is also everything that does not exist, for the non-existent is contained in his essence. He can only be apprehended by the mind, yet can be seen with the naked eye in the forms of the universe. He is immaterial, yet is in every material thing. There is nothing in existence but he. Hence, he is called by all the names of created beings. He has no special name because he is the Father of all. How can I praise thee, O God, and where can I praise thee? Do I look upward or downward, to the external or the internal? For thou art the locus which embraces everything. There is no locus but thee, and what sacrifice can I offer thee? For everything comes from thee. What time do I praise thee? There is no time, no instant of time that is far from thee. Do I belong to myself, or does anything of myself belong to me? Am I not thou? Thou art I, and thou art everything I do or say. Nay, thou art everything, and there is nothing besides thee. Yeah, that's a pretty good description of things. I would only add to that is that it helps to view the dynamics of this non-dual animating consciousness with respect to being a mirror, right? So we call it the mirror God. So this is the ultimate God. Now, of course, there are sub-gods. So we, for whatever reason, we believe that there is a competition or a mutual exclusivity between monotheism and polytheism. And I don't really see how that's the case, because my introduction into spirituality was realizing that astrology is true. One of the ways I proved that to myself, because there are so many ways that we can delude ourselves into believing, it's basically like confirmation bias, right? I needed a way of determining objectively if astrology was true. So this is what horary astrology is. This is astrology that if you were to ask me a question, I can take the current configuration of the planets as a chart, like a natal chart of that moment, and I can use that chart to answer the question you just asked me. Right, so that should be impossible, because we have all these different schools of astrology, right? Most notably, we use natal astrology. It's like, oh my God, you're a Pisces, I'm a Pisces too, you know? And in that sense, it does rely on a degree of subjectivity, right? Maybe I am just seeing the things that I want to see in this description, right? I'm being shaped by the description in terms of my self-perception. And then there's another school of astrology, which is electional astrology, which is we use astrology to determine lucky times. That can even require a degree of subjectivity in feeling it out. What doesn't, though, is horary astrology, right? If you ask me a yes or no question as to if something's going to come to pass, and then it comes to pass, and you keep doing this and I keep being right, that's no longer subjective, it's objective, right? So horary astrology is proof of the truth of astrology. And once you've proven the truth of astrology, now you've just opened up a whole can of worms as to what the implications of that is. Because what that means is we have all of these forces that are acting on the world ostensibly through their own agendas. Like they have their certain times, and then they have their certain swells of activity in the world. So basically it's like having a whole bunch of gods, right? There's really no way around that. Like when Mars comes around, the level of power Mars has over the world, in addition to all the planets, it shakes the world. That's a god, you know? That is a god. There's nearly no way around it. The mutual exclusive part is no true god, right? So I guess in the monistic religions, like the Abrahamic faiths, it's like, well, no, those are just lesser spirits that don't pay attention to those. Because we have a greater ultimate God, which is like, you know, I'm down with that, except for the fact that they just put forward another division of divinity, right? The Abrahamic God is just a solar spirit of some kind, right? And this is what we've done all throughout history. Like, there are so many religions, and if you were to list all the religions on a piece of paper, 4/5 of them would be astrological entities. I mean, I would argue that all of them are astrological entities, but even the people that drafted those religions would consider their religion to be astrological. I mean, you have the Egyptian pantheon, you have the Greek pantheon, the Babylonians always looking up at the stars, all these pagans, the Norse pantheon, all astrological. A lot of arguments have been made that even Christianity is encoded astrotheology, with Jesus being the sun, the 12 disciples being the signs of the zodiac. I don't know how much I believe in that, but yeah, you do definitely see some encoded astrology, astrotheology in the Bible, I think. So yeah, we have all these different gods, but really the truest God, the truest divinity is what we as New Agers who are I mean, I wouldn't consider myself to be a New Age. I wouldn't consider myself to be anything. I kind of just draw from everything. But people like to make fun of New Agers and they're talking about like source. But yeah, I mean, it basically is source. But another thing we could say about it is it's like a mirror. So it's the mirror God. And what I mean by that is, and actually we can even go to Ibn Arabi in the same Fusus al-Hikam. He says, when you see a form in a mirror, struggle within yourself to see the body of the mirror. You will, without any doubt, never see it. Yeah, weirdly, me and Ibn Arabi have had a convergence of thought and realization that I don't hear mentioned very often. Because obviously the idea of karma is in some sense kind of related to mirror images, because what is going around is coming around, but a lot of people haven't really investigated some of the origins of that theory, like the samskars. But I guess the ultimate point I was making with this is that there are scenes that you can see in the world that are manifestations of these higher principles of how the universe and the divine works. Because ultimately, what we're seeing is almost like a kaleidoscopic shattered mirror. You shatter a mirror in a way that's really ordered at the same time. It becomes like a kaleidoscope. And you can think of this mirror God. So once again, it's a mirror, but it's consciousness. So try to reconcile both those things in your mind at the same time. Like if you have two mirrors that are directly across from each other, see it as consciousness that's also a mirror looking into itself. So if you do that, if you put two mirrors across from each other, it creates an infinite regress. And that's basically the idea of what I would say the demiurge basically is God created from non-existence a God to look back into itself, and that's what created the infinite expanse. If you have two mirrors that are across from each other, it's an infinite expanse of mirrors. Those mirrors have an infinite regress. And so that is the infinite expanse of the universe. And so that's where it begins. That is a principle, a higher divine principle of cosmogony, of the emanation of generation of existence that is reflected in a physical thing. Of course, we take it further as this emanation, as this infinite expanse, this mirror looking back into itself, journeys outward. It is encountering the end that it's always expanding into, right? Because it is an expanse. right? A light has to emerge outward. It's not like the expanse of generated existence has expanded all the way, right? We wouldn't even say that about the universe. We wouldn't say that the universe has finalized its expansion. It's the expanse that has occurred after the Big Bang. Still expanding, and then the limits of what is being expanded into would be that this light is expanding into would be kind of the darkness that devours it. And so this darkness fragments the mirror. As this light progresses outward into existence, it casts a shadow, and that fragments the mirror. And then what you have is a kaleidoscope. Now imagine like a globe. Like if you're from America, you know the Epcot globe. Imagine that was all mirrors, right? And it's all these different mirrors looking back into itself. And it's a fragment of this giant demiurgic mirror god. I know this when I'm talking about these high-level divine concepts that bring awareness. There's all kinds of slamming of doors. Yeah, I've been pissing off a lot of people's demons lately. Oops. Oh well. But yeah, the kaleidoscopic view would be that if you were to look around yourself right now, you see all these different things which are divided. And that's like, it's like that trope of the model or the dancer, like that's sort of like Black Swan. You know what I mean? Like the female figure who has been traumatized in some way, so she shatters the mirror, or male. I've seen this kind of trope in movies too, of males doing it. But it's like revolted by the sight of your own ugliness or dissatisfaction with yourself, you shatter the mirror. And that's kind of what's happening, is that darkness causes us to fragment the mirror God. And so that's something we can see in the world as a expression of the divine principles of what's happening, right? We have all the things you see around you are fragments of a greater unity. There they are out there. I don't even want to give them any attention. Yeah, so we have reds, we have blues, we have greens, we have yellows, orange. But of course, with all of these colors superimposed, they would just be what we know they are, which is that brilliant light. And that's what we have in the world. It's kaleidoscopic, shattered mirror. There's another little visual analogy that I had seen that reminded me of this concept I'm sharing. Is just before I made this video, there's this video, really adorable video of a dog that is getting on this big slide, this giant slide where you got to go up a whole bunch of stairs to get to the slide. And the dog's going down the slide. It's like, oh my God, so much fun, so much fun, so much fun. But then, of course, you got to run up all those stairs, right? It just keeps doing it over and over again. And it made me think about the transmigration of the soul and our reincarnation, also the journey of the soul, the ultimate idea of ascending versus descending soul. Becoming a descending soul comes with its own amount of suffering, but ultimately it's the really easy part of it. Have you noticed that it's easier to break things than it is to fix them? Right? Breaking shit's super duper easy. I work in apartment maintenance, and I'll tell you, breaking shit is super, super easy because there's so many different. If you break one part of it, it's broken. Right? If you fuck up if you have a microwave and you're installing a microwave, and the mounting nut gets cross-threaded or destroyed. Just that the destruction of that nut has rendered that microwave useless, essentially. Well, not useless, but you're gonna have to like run it on the table. So it's not gonna be like a good looking apartment. But yeah, I mean, for our purposes, we can't use it. We can't, because it has to be mounted on the cabinet. Yep, one little nut. No technology. No $100 part of it. The actual part costs like $4, but that one little part's broken. Can't use it. Just a bigger idea of how it's much easier to break things than it is to fix them. Similarly, when you're a descending soul, your entire journey is about breaking that mirror, shattering that mirror, fragmenting yourself, making yourself worse. It's actually pretty easy to do, to give into the world. But when you got to rebuild that, it's not like a slide anymore. So it is for descending souls. It's almost like comical watching these people be so decadent and shitty and abusive and worldly, like they're just being given the world. It's like, you can't stay there, right? So you're going to become an ascending soul, and at that point you're going to be like the dog that's running up all those stairs. But just imagine like how big that slide is. If you think about it, right, a slide is a slide. You can just slide down that thing, and it can be a huge ass slide, like one of those water parks, and it would be no big deal. But at a certain point, the stairs become so big that it's like, I'm not about to get on this fucking slide again. Right? And that's what it's like becoming an ascending soul. It's like, holy shit, I have gone all the way down here. It was so easy to immerse myself into the world, to give into the flesh and the stories and the illusions down here. This dream that we have immersed ourselves in, that looking back up to where I need to go to, it's like, I gotta climb all those stairs. Yeah, and you gotta pay with your energy, your suffering. It's tediously slow. At a certain point, your legs give out. You just lay there and you wait. That's almost like what every lifetime is like. I wouldn't want to know what it's like for me to take psychedelics if I already think like this. Maybe one day. But yeah, it's like one lifetime is walking those steps until you can't take it anymore, and then just giving into death so that you can come back and do it again. And ultimately, the underlying nature of all of this, the mechanism, comes back to astrology. Because understanding astrology is like understanding the blueprint, the code of reality. If you could look at anything in the world with your eyes and see the code behind it, it would tell you a lot about the bigger picture of what it's encoded into, right? Because certain code is going to be relative to other code, and just by virtue of seeing the code behind it, you can have really penetrating insight into reality, rather than kind of having this very visceral, sensual understanding of it, where you're kind of lost in the world. If you actually look at the ideas behind reality, the code, you start to see some interesting things. And that's really the beauty of astrology. All these different religions have created mythologies to try to interpret their experience. But when you realize that there is a harmonious force causing these gods to move in predictable intervals around the earth in incredibly orderly ways, and their degree relationships to each other in the dance that they make with each other, and the shapes that they make with each other, either by them being aligned or opposite to each other or at 90 degrees of each other. They all signify different things. The sign that they're in. You can really have a penetrating insight into the world, I think, more with a higher degree of access than any one religion. Not to forget that most religions are explicitly astrological anyways, and I would argue that anybody that interfaces with the divine is in some way interfacing with the themes that are under the power of the planetary gods. So the Judeo-Christian faith, talking about God's influence in the world, they have to talk about individual segments of God's character, which very often fall directly under the jurisdiction of these planets. The ultimate true mirror God you can't say anything about. Once you take away that second mirror, there is no mirror to look back into itself. That's what it means to find God. And to be totally immersed in the source is to be emptied so much and to dissolve everything within you so much that the only thing left is not only the presence of consciousness, but the mere potential of consciousness, right? The mere stillness, the void, the Ein of the Ein Sof. When there is no mirror to gaze back into itself, to create that infinite regress, there is no story told because there is no expanse, there is no outward generation of light. The light has emanated outward yet. It exists as potential. But that's what it means to come back to God. And it's a journey in and of itself also to reach the point of just being a mirror gazing back into itself. I'd say realistically that's what we should be putting our focus on. And an interesting thing is the relation of certain planets that I'm going to talk about that create so many of the cycles of our existence here on Earth. And this will give you a more penetrating insight into the nature of reality and the divine. It starts with the Thema Mundi. Most people who follow astrology haven't learned traditional astrology, so they don't know about these things. Of those that do, most are not going to know what I'm about to talk about, which is that the exaltation. So we have planets that rule signs. You may know that Mars rules Aries or Venus rules Taurus, but we call that domicile. So when a planet is in that sign that it rules, it's said to be like it's at home, and it does pretty well there. And the Thema Mundi is from the Hellenistic astrologers who believed that they found the chart of the beginning of the universe. So it's the birth chart of not a person, but the universe itself. And if you Google the Thema Mundi, that's what you'll see. You'll see the moon in Cancer on the ascendant, rising. You'll see the sun in Leo. You'll see Mercury in Virgo. You'll see Venus in Libra. You'll see Mars in Scorpio. You'll see Jupiter in Sagittarius. And you'll see Saturn in Capricorn. That's rulership, right? There is a separate idea, which is the idea of exaltation. Exaltation is another dignity, and it refers to basically when the planet is at its strongest. There's a certain degree of the zodiac where each planet is at its strongest, and there's a certain theory behind how these degrees were determined that I'm not going to get into. But an really interesting thing is that they're in this exaltation scheme of the Thema Mundi, which is the position at which the planets are the strongest in the scheme of the creation of the universe. There are 4 planets, which we call the superior planets. It was called in antiquity the superior planets, that are on each of what's called the angles. So we know you have a rising sign that's on the ascendant. There is a mid-heaven, which is directly above, and we can understand this with the sun. The sun rises in the east, and when it rises, it's on the rising degree. It's on the rising sign. Then the sun is directly overhead. We say it's on the mid-heaven, so it's on the angle of the mid-heaven. It's culminating. Then the sun is setting, and that's on the descendant. It's descending. And so that's on the western horizon. And then we have what's called the nadir, which is, if you were to imagine directly above yourself, there has to be a directly below yourself too, in relation to the division of the sky. So if you imagine on the other side of the earth, directly below, it's the nadir. And 4 of these superior planets are on each of the angles. So in the Thema Mundi, the moon, the domicile is rising. It's on the rising sign. But in the exaltations, it's actually Jupiter, and again, there was the moon in Cancer that was rising as rulership, but as exaltation, it's Jupiter in Cancer that's rising. So rising means growing, expanding, and being nurtured to a state of greater growth, which is the Cancerian archetype. So this idea of rising is related to Jupiter in its degree of exaltation, which is in Cancer. Then we have the mid-heaven. And the mid-heaven is a zenith. It is a peak. Almost a... it's like a perfected state. It's like it's reached the pinnacle. And the sun is exalted on the midheaven. It's where it's at its strongest in Aries, because in the Thema Mundi, Aries is culminating. Aries is on the midheaven. So 18 degrees of Aries, which we'll say is the 19th degree, but that means that you're starting at 0, and if you count 19 up from 0, it's not 19, it's 18, because you have to count from 0 to 1. 18 degrees of Aries is the degree of exaltation for the sun. So it's a perfected golden age, a golden state. So you can almost see the relation of the Treta Yuga and to the Satya Yuga, right? The progression back to gold. But of course, from gold, from the pinnacle, there is nowhere to go but down. So on the descendant of the Thema Mundi, exalted is the planet Mars. Popular astrology, modern astrology, has done a pretty bang-up job of misconstruing the nature of this planet. Somehow people think it has to do with sexuality, which entirely falls under Venus, but they didn't study traditional astrology, so they wouldn't know that. Mars is very much the opposite of Venus in so many ways. It's not about lovemaking. It's about hostility and quarrel and divorce. Divorce is a very martial thing. Separation, right? You have this in the Kabbalah. You have the Tree of Life, and Mars is associated with the sphere Geburah on the pillar of severity, which is ultimately associated with divisions, right? It shares a pillar with Saturn, which is about isolation in the sickle of Cronus, the divisions that make up time and form, right? Saturn is in Bina, at the pillar of form, the top of the pillar of form. Mercury allows us to look at the world and to divide it into pieces that we can reconstruct into something intelligible, right? It has to do with communication. Communication is dividing the observed world into syllables that have meanings that we can reorganize into ways of describing the world. So it is by nature in HUD separative. So Mars has to do with separations. Also, it has to do with drought. It has to do with decay, really, which is funny to think about. But think about no, it's your vital fire. It's your energy. It's kinda. You have a little bit of that there. But the thing to understand is that Mars is what we call a malefic planet, meaning it does bring decrease, and it does bring hardship, and it does bring strife. A lot of what modern astrology has come to associate with Mars, as far as its virtues, are actually traceable to the sun, which is not to say that Mars doesn't have its virtues. Even Saturn has its virtues. But a lot of it comes back to the sun, as far as what modern astrology, popular astrology, folk astrology relates to it, because the sun is the other fiery planet, right? The sun's the other fiery planet, so it's very easy to mistake the intemperately hot and dry, which is another way of saying fiery in a malefic way, in an extreme way, Mars, to misconstrue and inject into that the qualities of the temperately hot and dry, which is the benefic. Yeah, it is actually benefic sun, although later astrologers would say that Jupiter is the greater benefic and Venus is the lesser benefic. Really, some of our earlier sources, especially comes to magic, like the Picatrix, the Gayat al-Hakim, will tell you that the sun is actually a benefic, and that's absolutely true. And that's why the Egyptians worshipped it, and so many other religions worshipped it. It is the bringer of life before it is the bringer of any sort of strife, although it is capable of doing that. Of course, in astrology, we have a phenomenon called combustion, where a planet gets too close to the sun and its virtues are burned away and it becomes dysfunctional. But I bring up that all up to say that Mars does bring drought, and Mars does bring burning things away and bringing decrease. But also it can bring refinement. Mars rules over alchemists, according to William Lilly, the horary astrologer, famous horary astrologer of the Renaissance period. And alchemy is nothing more than the process of, among other things, using fire to refine a base metal into a precious metal. So it's all about refinement. So we have dissension now. We have things being decreased. Mars brings decrease with the descendant. That's exalted in Capricorn, which in the Thema Mundi is on the descendant. And then on the nadir, which is the lowest point, the rock bottom of the chart, Saturn is exalted very close to 18 degrees, like the sun. It's actually at 20 degrees, or the 21st degree, I should say, which is the 20th degree, really. Degree 20, right? 20 degrees of Libra. Saturn is exalted at 20 degrees of Libra, which is basically directly opposite the sun, right? So we know that the sun and Saturn are opposites. The sun rules Leo, Saturn rules Aquarius, opposite signs. And sun brings brightness and perfection and grace and glory and victory. And rulership and kingship and high standing. And Saturn is the opposite of all those things. Saturn brings all things unwanted battles. It brings ugliness. It brings disgrace. It brings poor standing. It brings actually poverty. So I should add that the sun will bring riches, the riches of a king. And Saturn brings poverty. It makes you into a peasant. The sun rules gold, which is the perfected precious metal. Is it one of the goals of alchemy? One of them is to turn lead into gold. And Saturn rules lead. And the sun rules brightness, and Saturn rules shady things, where there is no light. And the sun is the most visible planet, and Saturn is the least visible planet. So they are opposite even in their exaltations. Of course, Aries and Libra are opposite signs, and the sun is exalted in Aries, and Saturn is exalted in Libra. And so these are called the superior planets: the sun to Mars to Jupiter to Saturn. And this cycle of rising to perfection, falling from perfection to a lesser state, falling from a lesser state, descending from a lesser state to the rock bottom, to the lowest point, the nadir. The nadir means the lowest point. And then rising back up from this dark night of the soul, this Saturn, this negredo, this lead, to begin the journey back to gold, is ultimately the fundamental archetype of a cycle that describes the life of anything that exists. Everything is generated, and then it rises to a greater state, to a pinnacle, and then it falls, right? And it descends, and then from the descension, it reaches its lowest point. But this cycle just keeps going on. So now I want to get into how to break the cycle, because divinity is found at the center of all cycles. Divinity is found at the center of all cycles. So that's kind of the mistake of some people of Abrahamic faith. Say God is the light of the world, brings good things. Satan, which is once again another misreading of the text, and there is also no character named Lucifer in the Bible. It's too much to go into, but there's only one mention of Lucifer in the Bible, and it's in Isaiah, and it's basically referring to the king of Babylon rather than some angel, fallen angel. But they separate the desirable aspects of reality, say it comes from God, say all these undesirable, unpleasant things comes from Satan. And this sort of dualistic thinking prolongs separation from the divine, because once again, if there's an up and there's a down, it's like a ball, it's like a pendulum. That's a cycle. To the left and to the right, and to the left and to the right. So this fundamental cycle, which is the cycle of superior planets, is the thing that's prolonging separation from divinity. Because if divinity is found at the center of all cycles, then participating in the cycle and the swings back and forth of the cycle, of course, separates you from divinity. So, ultimately, that's what polarity is all about. And it's to be understood that the image that's on the screen here is Pluto. And Pluto ultimately rules polarity, right? A lot of things that modern astrology attributes to Pluto actually belongs pretty directly to Saturn and has throughout most of history. Pluto's influence is very hard to describe because Pluto is the closest planet to God. But we can come close. There's a lot of subtlety to it. It's something that kind of escapes description a little bit, in the same way that you're going to have a really hard time seeing Pluto with some of the strongest of microscopes. Or telescopes, I'm not sure which. I think not microscopes, I think it was telescopes, yeah. But Pluto is at the center of the cycles. Pluto rules over the ensnarement of the soul into the cycles and the increasing pendulum nature of the cycles that has to do with the world and our lust for the things in it. Our lust for the things of the world causes the pendulums, say like a four-sided pendulum, really it's a dodecagonal pendulum, it's a 12-sided pendulum, because we have 12 signs of the zodiac. But once again, we're thinking in terms of the superior planets, 4 of them. This double pendulum, this four-way pendulum, causes us to lust for the things of the world and to hate when they're removed from us, causing us to lust for the things of the world even more. This ensnares us into the world. Right now, I'm not referring to reincarnating only on Earth, but the Earth is an astrological principle that we can understand, and the Earth is the world, and it is associated with unconsciousness, materiality, and the physical senses. The sun also has some rulership over the senses, but there is a fundamental distinction between pure spirit and presence, observation, and the stimulation of the senses through the physical world, right? So those are two different kinds of observation. And one is a progression to awareness through the Earth, through Pluto, which empties. So try to join me on this journey, because it's kind of hard to describe how Pluto works. Very high level advanced understanding. It's like the highest planetary god there is. Which brings us back to the one true non-dual mirror god. But Pluto does the job of emptying us out of everything but pure awareness and consciousness. Right, so with Pluto comes more consciousness, more awareness of how things work. It brings hidden things to the surface, right? So Pluto is associated with these expansions, these massive expansions in consciousness. And a lot of things of Pluto are passed down to be regulated by Saturn. But Pluto is this pull back to God, which involves being emptied of everything that creates fragmentation of the mirror. So it's destruction of particulars, whereas the earth is of the nature of many particulars. In the Tao Te Ching, in Taoism, it said from the Tao comes one, from the one comes two, and what they mean by that is from the Tao comes one Wu Ji, which is in Kabbalah terms is Keter, which is the one, the original emanation. From the one comes two. Come on, I'm talking about Taoism. You guys should know what that means. Yin and Yang. And from the two comes three, which is the San Bao, which is the three treasures, which is the Jing, Qi, and Shen, which are the different categories of the things that exist, which could be more of a physical thing, is Jing, more of a taking on a concrete existence. Qi being the almost the breath and the energy of the things that are in physical existence, and then the Shen, which is the spiritual component behind it, like a finer, more ethereal version of Qi. And then from the three comes 10,000 things, all embracing yin and yang. Well, the 10,000 things are all of the ways that the elements combine to create the things of our world. They are all of the fragmentations, and that has a lot to do. You can see a lot of this in the Kabbalah, which draws, I think, pretty heavily, if not being a synchronicity of thought, with the cosmogony of the Tao Te Ching. Right? From the one, from the Tao, from the Ein Sof comes the one, which is the Keter. From the Keter comes the Yin and Yang, which is the Bina, and Chokhmah, which is the black and white. And then after those spheres, we have our groupings of three. We have the one pillar on the pillar of severity, one sphere on the pillar of severity, one sphere on the pillar of mercy, and then kind of like a fulcrum between them on the middle pillar. So we have these threes, and then it comes down to the earth, the Malkut, which is this cross of matter, which is the fourth thing, which is the four elements, and the four elements all combine in all these different ways to create the things that are in generated existence. Right, so the earth has a lot to do with fragmentation, right? It's the 10,000 things. And incidentally, the world, which we call Earth, is pretty demonic. So we just said 10,000 things. Well, in the Bible, it's my name is Legion, for we are many. Like, what do you mean we are many? Well, yeah, it's the one God, and then there's the demons, which are legion because they are many. So that's a distinction between unity of the divine and the fragmentation of demonic existence. And that's partially the interpretation of the Klipit, which is what they call the tree of death, but other people will just call it we consider the various sephira on the tree of life, the Kabbalah, to be fruit. Then the Klipit are the shells of the fruit, the rind of the fruit, the undesirables, the things that are keeping you from getting to the fruit. And Thamiel, which is the shell, the is what the meaning of Qliphoth, of Keter, the shell of Keter, Keter referring to non-dual unity, the original emanation, containing the potential that was brought into reality. The opposite of that, of this totally unified non-dual Keter, is Thamiel, which is the Qliphoth, the demonic corollary of Keter. And Thamiel is associated with duality, fundamental duality, fundamental separation. It's almost like the two-headed snake biting at itself. I mean, it's not an ancient Kabbalistic or Judaic belief, but later conceptions of the Qliphoth put Satan and Malach ruling over the Qliphoth, or over the Qliphoth of Thamiel, and it's the only sphere that is ruled by two spirits. So that's just an example, exemplifying what Thamiel is. And so, that's my train of thought. What was I talking about? Yeah, the world is demonic. And so we'll be punished for participating in the things of the world if we're not on that slide, if we're not that dog going down that slide, if we're not a descending soul. Spirit, which is the effects of Pluto, right? Pluto's job is to return us to pure spirit, pure celestial principle, to return us to God, to repair the mirror of its fragmentation. It creates that polarity. It's what pulls us to that. When we continue to immerse ourselves in the things of the world, and to not empty of ourselves of everything that binds us to the world, and separates, then this planet, which some would call malefic, with each lifetime, once again, Pluto rules death and rebirth, right? So Pluto rules the original ensnarement into cyclical existence. It's responsible for the journey of the soul. It presides over it in every way. It presides over it in every way. It presides over it in bringing pure consciousness from source into these layers of fragmentation and division, and letting that soul go down that descending soul slide to become 10,000 things, to give itself over to the demonic nature of the world, to become legion, because we are many. Then it's his job to bring it back up, right? So that's how it becomes the ascending soul. So Pluto is at the center of the cycle, and its job, the Earth's job, is to, as part of the descending soul journey, in a sense, this is the real God and Satan, if you'd like, which some people say is the Sun and Saturn. I would say that's a distinction on a different axis, right? That's the holy and unholy of a different axis that I can get into in a moment, if I haven't already gone into it enough. But the Earth does the job of making us sensual, right? So not perceiving the essence behind things, but actually getting lost in these sensations, right? Sensation seeking, running away from consciousness into simplified forms of consciousness by seeking out, by disavowing intelligence and awareness and consciousness in favor of pure sensation seeking of the five senses. And so the earth creates these oscillations. The earth spurs this cycle of the heavens, of the exaltation of the superior planets, of the swells of rising and perfection and decay and death. Our lust for the things of the world. We want the pleasurable, exciting things, and we don't want them to end. And that's what binds us to the world, is this sensation seeking. And so the earth propels that. The earth rules Taurus. And you're only going to get that here because if you think about it, each sign of the zodiac is ruled by a planet, and it's in a formation of the actual order of the planets. So we have Virgo, which is Mercury, and we have Libra, which is Venus, and we have Scorpio, which is Mars, and then we have Sagittarius, which is Jupiter, and then we have Capricorn, which is Saturn, and then we have Aquarius, which is Uranus, and then we have Pisces, which is Neptune, right? We have Aries, which is Mars, and then we have, well, Taurus, which is Venus, but what comes after Mars? Earth. Earth is sandwiched between Venus and Mars. So that's a pretty intuitive argument for that. If the nature of Taurus and its relation to all the things I'm talking about is not clarity enough, and the Earth's nature of giving stability of form and slowing things down, it's a false stability. The sun is a false light, and the Earth is a false stability. True stability is to have no potential energy, right? To experience heat death, which is to have no differential of energy between 2 points. If we cock that slingshot back to aim at the things that we lust for in the world, if that's our attachment, if that's our desire, we cock that slingshot back, we've added potential energy to that slingshot. There's no other possibility than for that differential in energy to disperse when that slingshot sends that projectile in that direction, right? A pendulum, if we were to hold the ball of a pendulum from moving from side to side, it's no longer kinetic energy, it's potential energy. We're holding it in place. If we release that ball, the potential energy becomes kinetic energy. Our attachments and our desires create the potential energy, and they create kinetic energy, and they create the whirling of this pendulum back and forth. And it's a 4-sided or a 12-sided pendulum. And that's what the cycle of samsara is we keep coming back here because we love the things of the world, even though they hurt us. Even though we recognize that life here is suffering, it's our lust for the 10,000 things and our senses which keeps bringing us back here. And so Pluto, the Earth, spurs on this cycle. And our attachment to the jovial things and the solar things spurs on this cycle, right? We love perfection and we love rising. We love rising to perfection. But perfection in a perverted sense, perfection in this thing feels really good. And it's very tempting and beautiful. The term tempted, the world, the earth tempts. That's why it's quote unquote Satan's kingdom, things of the world. But Pluto is the opposite of all that. We said that Earth rules Taurus. I mean, you guys see where I'm going with this, right? Pluto rules Scorpio. opposite signs. Pluto exists at the center of all cycles. It's beyond even Neptune, which is responsible for bringing us out of duality. The polarity of Pluto pulls us back through these things. Right? So you think about the order of the planets, the descending soul, Pluto willingly gives away its grasp to the earth. It is the same thing as saying God willingly lets consciousness give itself over to demons so that it can have knowledge of God. Right? So for the mirror to perfectly fracture and to observe the 10,000 things, to observe the demons, which are many, which are legion, and then to come back to unity, is to know God. And so Pluto regains its grasp and then brings you back. That pull to God comes back, and that's what Chosen One is. And because God is a mirror God, we experience all of the images and former intentions we've developed and cultivated as those 10,000 things. We are many, right? The many perversities of the soul, the samskars. The mirror God reflects upon itself, and then we, as chosen ones, have the demonic activity, which is the things in our soul that are from previous lifetimes in our descending soul journey. It's part of the Kali Yuga. So, in addition to the cycle of the planets, the Jupiter, the Sun, that's the rising, and then the Mars, the Saturn, the fall, down to the lowest point, down to disgrace. Pluto helps us to stop the potential energy by stopping it at its root. The root of it is we lust for the things of Jupiter and the Sun. We lust for all the pleasant and good things. So that's why the Sun is the false light that some of the New Age people talk about in Christianity being a false light, is that Yahweh and Jesus are solar archetypes. They bring good things, they bring pleasant things, as long as we praise them and give worship to them. Solar. But the real light is the non-dual light of God, right, which is the mirror God. Almost like a pantheistic, I said it better than I could ever say. It's a mirror reflecting God. And because we lust after these things, we keep reincarnating. But it's also a false stability. The earth is a false stability because in all of the chaos that the world creates and all the chaos that the 10,000 things, the demons create, we crave, rightfully so, stability. But it's a false stability that the earth gives us, which is why in the transmigration of the soul, these tormented descending souls, once the weight of the karma becomes too large, they ask for simpler and simpler states of consciousness to retreat more into unconsciousness, into the senses, retreat more into the earth, into the world. And so that's how they become animals. False stability. True stability is to release all potential energy, which is what Pluto does. All the outer planets. That's why Uranus rules electricity, is because all electricity is we are going to we're going to create a circuit, and then we're going to, let's say in a battery, we're going to close this circuit so that electrons can catch up with where a electron has been displaced to correct an energy differential. It would be a description of how a battery works. That's what Uranus does. That's how we get the surging, upending nature of Uranus is that Saturn separates, so it opens the circuit. Uranus closes the circuit, and so we get lightning strikes, we get surges of power, because energy differentials between 2 points are being corrected. It's working towards, it's being entropic, it's being entropy, it's working towards the heat death. So that's true stability, is heat death, is having no energy meaning that there is no potential for activity between 2 points, maybe would be a good way of describing it. And all the molecules are perfectly divided, right? Heat death, entropy. So it's not, we don't have molecules attaching themselves to one area. So Pluto helps us get rid of our attachment to one area. And so that way we reach the 0 point, empty ourselves. Pluto is like a surgeon. It removes, it penetrates, and it uproots and it removes. It empties of everything but God, God being pure non-dual awareness, which is the same mirror consciousness that is the generated existence before the 10,000 things, before the kaleidoscopic fragmentation of the mirror. So in addition to all of these dynamics, in addition to the cycle of the rising and the culminating and the setting and the rock bottom of the superior planets, and in addition to Pluto and Earth, right? The Earth is expanding us outward into this cycle, causing the pendulum to swing harder and faster. Pluto's in the center of this cycle, causing us to, causing that pendulum to lose momentum and to come back to a stable 0 point, to get us out of the cycle of death and rebirth, which Pluto rules. There's Ketu and Rahu. And these, you could say, are emblematic of the function of Pluto and the Earth, almost extensions of them, which kind of correlates with evolutionary astrology a little bit, but from what I can tell from evolutionary astrology, they've got the nodes and their significations backwards, because the traditional understanding of the nodes of Ketu and Rahu, figured in the picture on the screen here, next to Pluto, the nodes, is that Ketu is actually associated with isolation and detachment from worldly things and spiritual experiences. And Rahu is actually associated with the worldly sort of pleasures and experiences and the commingling. Yeah, once you are able to reconcile that, oh yeah, I have to come back. But that brings you back to Pluto. What's the point of that? It brings you back to the 0 point. But also, the problem is that we are lusting for the things of the Sun and Jupiter. We're disavowing the things of Saturn and Mars. We're disavowing the unpleasant, diminishing experiences. And this creates addiction. And addiction is what creates reincarnation, because it's the attachment to the Earth. And the Earth is the swinging of the pendulum and the desire to see that pendulum swing. Right? So Pluto lets it happen. Pluto lets death and rebirth happen. But Pluto's ultimate goal is not death and rebirth. Pluto's ultimate goal is to get you beyond the cycle of death and rebirth. And so when we embrace Saturn, we embrace Mars, we embrace the dissension, we embrace the rock bottom, when we embrace things being deleted and minimized and removed by way of alchemy, we decrease the momentum of the pendulum. I'm speaking about Saturn. There's a crow outside. I like that crow. It always wakes me up right on time. Yeah, so by lusting for the desirable elements, solar and Jupiter, this pendulum keeps swinging harder. We keep reincarnating more. And Pluto's job is to make us be alchemical, right? To work productively with the undesirable elements, the lead, right? So Pluto compels us to desire Saturn, the ugly, the undesirable. This all happens mostly after physical death, between lifetimes. You notice that our birth charts are riddled with imperfections, and that's reflected in our lifetimes. Our lifetimes are full of challenge and hardship and conflict. That's because the us that exists beyond the self that exists beyond death craves challenge, right? The self that exists after death, between lifetimes, says, I wish I would have had more transformation in my earthly lifetime. I wish I did more. I wish I was more transformative. I wish I came closer to God. I wish I confronted more of the impurities in my soul and transformed them. I wish I was more of an alchemist. Pluto is the ultimate ruler of alchemy. So it says, okay, if that's what you really want, next time you go down there, I'm going to give you more lead. The lead is in your unconscious mind. It's your shadow. Saturn rules shady things. And so more of our shadow comes through. And what that means is we're born into a certain part of time in the Kali Yuga that is associated with more of our shadow. So we ask for more lead so that we can do more alchemy. But on Earth, of course, is very unpleasant. We say, less lead. God, this sucks. I'm in so much pain. I am beset by all manner of hardship and conflict and disgrace. The chosen ones are disgraced. They are hated by the world, and they are humiliated and disrespected by the world and everything. Well, that's our shadow. We were them, of course. But this is what we ask for when we ask for more lead. The more times that we don't do our work as alchemists, we don't, through love and forgiveness, dissolve and empty, right? Neptune, love and forgiveness, dissolve. Pluto, to empty ourselves, to uproot the fragmentation of the soul. Each lifetime, that megaphone gets louder. C.S. Lewis said that suffering is God's megaphone, is to get our attention. And the attention they're trying to get, that God's trying to get, is, dude, get out of the world. That's like the ultimate thing it's trying to tell you, is get out of this cycle of the earth, get out of the world, and come back to spirit. Empty yourself. Return to spirit, return to spiritual things. Because the things of the world are the 10,000 things. They are the demons, which are legion, which are many, and they're here to torment you. Dude, wake up, or I'm gonna have to show you the true nature of the world. And so that's why it's really important for us to not treat life as being for pleasure or for happiness, but as for transformation. Happiness comes when we're rejoined with God, when the mirror is complete again and unified. So, yeah. I think that was everything I had to say on it. Yeah, to riff on the last part again. Yeah, suffering is God's megaphone. And chosen ones are full of suffering. But we chose that. We chose more lead. But if you're gonna live in a world with a bunch of lead that your higher self chose, and that you're gonna choose again after you die, you better learn to start working with it. And so there is magic to make the lead go down, to make the world less shady, to decrease the Saturn, and that's by using the sun. We said that the sun is the opposite of Saturn. The sun brings the most wanted, desirable things. It damn near brings orgasm, right? Worldly orgasm. It's in fact the thing that one of the big players in keeping us reincarnated here, because it's our glories, it's our high points, it's our pleasurable parts in the world that we are attracted to, right? Really, the Jupiter of it all, the rising, is only just to bring us back to the sun. We want that golden age. We want our golden years again. That's nostalgia. We lust for our peaks and our we lust for our pinnacles. But we can, if we bite off more than we can chew with the lead, as long as we recognize that we are here to live an alchemical existence, we can use magic of the sun. And there's some very powerful sun magic in the Greek magical papyri. I made a video on this channel called Blessing of the Sun, which if you use the appropriate incense, which according to Becatrix in the Celestial Petition section of Book 3, Chapter 7, is, if I can recall, saxifrage flower plants, and then we have the wild pomegranate flower, and then we have the storax, and then the aloes wood, and the saffron, and the frankincense, and I think there is one more. It's gonna bug the shit out of me. Come on, something solar, man. Oh, nutmeg. If you use all of those as an incense and you mix them in equal parts, you summon the spirits of the sun to help decrease your karma. Saturn is the lord of karma. It rules the lead. It rules the shadow. It rules the undesirable, ugly portions of our samskars, whereas the sun rules our glories and our great parts, desirable portions. I want to cleanse all samskars back to zero through Neptune and Pluto. But we can draw from our positive, glorious samskars to decrease the difficulty of our lifetime to make our alchemical process easier. And that's something I should mention, is this should only be used, this magic of the sun should only be used to make it so our karma isn't too overwhelming to work alchemically with. We shouldn't use the sun to immerse ourselves more into the desirable portions of the world, which is the temptation of it. We should use magic theurgically rather than thaumaturgically. We should use it as a way of coming back to God rather than making the world work in a way that's pleasurable to us, because the world is just demonic anyway. It's just here to hurt us. Why do magic that makes us get more immersed deeper into the world and gives us desirable things to become attached to if the world is our tormentor anyways? So we do theurge, and we use magic to connect with God, ultimately. So yeah, but if we need to decrease the difficulty, if we are so beset with challenge and difficulty that we can't work productively with our lead, can't be alchemists, we can't forgive and love our projections of our shadow in the world that are all around us and are the demons that are all around us, then we decrease the difficulty by using the magic of the sun. So again, on my channel is the Blessing of the Sun video. And you do that with the appropriate incense on a Wednesday at noon, or at Sunday at sunrise. And everybody wants to know why, you can just comment, because this video is already getting too long. But yeah, that's polarity. Empty yourself and dissolve. Dissolve through love and forgiveness. Empty by embracing what your daemon, your higher self, has appointed to you as your fortune, right, as your natal chart. Don't try to change your natal chart through magic. Embrace your natal chart, embrace your fortune, embrace your fate, and embrace the lead that you have agreed to face in this lifetime, because you're going to want to face it when you're dead. You're going to say, why wasn't I more of an alchemist? It's the same thing over and over again. That's what keeps us coming back here. Be an alchemist while you're still alive. Yep, and with that final brain shutdown.exe, and I can't remember what I was talking about, I think I'll end the video here. Thank you for watching.